Hey, good morning, everybody. God bless you. I hope this video finds you doing well this morning. Hope everybody is feeling good. Hope you've gotten your day started, moving forward, and definitely drawing closer to God. Today, we're going to talk about a much needed subject, which I tend to get quite a few questions on, and that subject is the ego. And the ego can best be defined by the very letters of the ego, ego, which to me represents edging God out. You can say out of the picture. And what that means is that oftentimes when the mechanics of our mind is going about, because that's literally what's happening up there. The mechanics of our mind is constantly playing these same ideas, these same thoughts, and really just playing the same old song. And oftentimes when the mechanics are running like that, you can best believe just by examining that there is nothing spiritual about what's being said. There's nothing pertaining to God or peace that's being said, but the ego sort of runs off of the mechanics of the things that we've learned, the things that we've experienced, and the things that we've been through in our lifetime. I wrote a few things down pertaining to the ego. As I said, the ego is mechanical. It's constantly playing the same old. Always talking about what has happened or our letdowns or our situations that we've been through. Um, to me, the ego represents the history of you. From start to finish, from the beginning point of I could say at 2 years old, 3 years old, when you first started really learning certain things, all the way up to this present moment. It's that history, it's that story of our letdowns, it's the story of our failures, it's the story of our achievements, our fears. It really is the dictionary or library of ourselves, in all the stories and chapters and situations that we've been through. To me, the ego, as I consider the ego, is the adversary of peace, or adversary to peace, should I say. And what that means is, when you're spiritual, there should be a peace within us, consciously. We should be at peace most of the time, consciously, we should be in control of our own thoughts and be in control of our own ideas. But instead, there seems to always be a noise going on inside of our head. It's always some type of conversation, always some type of situation being spoken of within our consciousness. And that's the mechanics that I was speaking of earlier. Um, the ego seems not to like peace. It seems not to favor the stillness and the quietness that we should have within. The ego seems like it's always looking for something, or should I say, always playing some type of song or some type of situation about our life. I consider the ego also to be the instigator. And what that means is that the ego is always looking, again, it's always instigating the what if, the possibilities of, it's always trying to make us consider, it's always seem to be meddling in something within our life, oftentimes when nothing is even wrong, you know. Um, the ego to me is the restless rouser. And as I said, it seems like the ego is always busy, always playing, again, those same old songs. Recently I talked to a buddy of mine, and he was telling me just a few days ago, he said that he had what he thought was a nervous breakdown. And I said, well, what happened? And he said, he just got to a place where he didn't want to leave the house, he didn't want to go to work, and he said he was just locked in his house dealing with himself, idea after idea, thought after thought. It's like he couldn't get past his very own self, his very own story, his very own history of thinking. And if you've ever been in a situation when them thoughts get to going, it literally does feel like you're going against another individual, because there's you, and you kind of know how you want to feel or how you should want to respond to a certain situation, and then there's all the dialogue that's going on inside of our head. So, to me, again, the ego is constantly restless, and God forbid that there is a real situation, because the ego again can instigate that situation and blow that situation up, and just dialogue about that situation to the point that it literally can make us miserable, and we can even feel physical illness behind what's being said within our head. The ego is what I consider the fearful friend. And based on everything I've just said about the ego, and what it does, why would I call it friend? And I say friend because, it seems like it's always there. It's always there whispering in our ear about something, And some of us have friends that don't always mean the best, but we still keep them around or whatever. And then a lot of times they may be filled with drama and constantly got negative things to say. And for some reason we keep them around. Same thing here with the ego, it seems like it's that fearful friend, it's always, again, looking to analyze and searching for the next imposing threat or imposing situation, it's always whispering to me mostly the negativities of life and not the positivities of life. Again, the ego doesn't ever seem to speak of anything that God would want us to know, or anything that would be healthy and productive for our spiritual being, The ego, again, just seems like it's always there to warn us or to possibly predict what might happen. And that's an important word when I say might, because oftentimes the things that sometimes we're dealing with when it comes to the ego is not that they're actually happening. Sometimes they never happen, but what the ego tends to deal with is with the word might. This might happen. That might happen. It's a good chance it might happen. And sometimes we'll get so wound up in the possibility of that we'll forget to be at peace right now. The ego, to me, also is what I call the nonsensical narrator. The nonsensical narrator. And when you think about what a narrator is constantly telling the story, mechanically, constantly telling the story. But what I say is that the ego is a nonsensical narrator. What means is that a lot of times the things that the ego is saying, they really just don't make any sense. They just don't make any sense. I mean, you really think about it again. The ego is never talking about what's happening right now. The ego is constantly taking us back into the past to say, do you remember when, and do you remember when that happened, or do you remember when they did this to you? And in the sense of what that has to do with now, there is no sense to it, because right now in this moment we could be perfectly fine, but the ego will constantly take us back to that past moment or past experience or situation to sort of make us feel a certain way right now. One of the other things the ego does is it tries to, again, go into the future with the whole might thing. This might happen, that might happen. When you think about it, sometimes when the ego is doing this mechanical run, sometimes listen to what it says. Listen to what it says, and then look at your present situation, and you'll find that what the ego is talking about doesn't have anything to do with now. It doesn't have nothing to do with now. It's either telling you a story of what was, or it's telling you a story of what might be. But it's never seeming to be talking about this moment. Even if you're in a situation, you can pretty much look at the situation and judge it. But what the ego does, the ego will look at this situation and then give you all the possible outcomes that might happen, And so, to me, that's one of the things that the ego does. It constantly keeps you out of the now moment. Constantly keeps you out of that peaceful place. I also call the ego the assumer. The assumer. Because again, a lot of times what we're dealing with when it comes to the ego, is not really tangible, concrete evidence or tangible, concrete information. The ego oftentimes assumes things. It's like, you look out at a situation, and it's a perfectly clear situation, at least to the people that know what's going on. But sometimes the ego is uninformed, so what it does is it looks at a situation, it judges that situation, and assumes it knows and understands what's actually going on. It assumes that it knows the possible outcome of the situation. It assumes that, the equation of this situation is totally being based on what it understands. Not what's actually going on, but what the ego thinks it understands. The ego to me is what I would consider the singer of self. The singer of self. Why the singer of self? Because, everything that the ego really talks about is about self. What's good for self, what's bad for self, the negativities of self, the positivities of what will be good for self. And when I say positivities, I don't mean like the ego is telling us anything positive. The ego is oftentimes trying to tell us maybe what we need or maybe what we should get that will make our life positive. And oftentimes, again, it's not talking about spiritual things, but it's saying, if you got that new house or that new car or even that person in your life, that would be a positive move. Because to me, the ego is very thirsty, never satisfied. And what you understand is that even when you get that very thing that the ego tells you to get, whether it be a person, place, or thing, it only lasts for a short time. Because why? The ego is nothing but the mechanics of ideas. So the moment it comes up with one good, so-called positive idea, once that idea has been sort of lived for a moment, then the ego has to create another idea that maybe should be favorable for our life. The ego, above all, is what I consider to be the devil. Now, some church people would, find this to be very alarming to call the ego the devil when clearly they've made something else the devil. Here's why I call the ego the devil. Because whenever you look at any real spiritual story of the past, there was always God, and then there was always evil. There was always the grace and spirituality and positivity of God, and there was always the negative elements, the elements that were against the truths of God. And so when I think about the ego, when I think about all the time that I've studied, all the meditation, all the prayer, the fellowship, just trying to draw closer to God every day, when I think about that, you would think that I would be a pretty solid person. You think that I would be whole. You think that I would be able to move forward in faith, not fearing, going forward for God. But what I find is that there is something else within my consciousness. Because often I'm being conscious of what God is saying, but then oftentimes there are these other ideas that seem to appear. And oftentimes, as I said in the very beginning, they are contradictory, a contradiction to God. Paul talked about the ego in the Bible. He says, the things that I would do are the things that I often don't do, but the things that I don't want to do are often the things that I do. And he talked about the battle between consciously knowing what was right, knowing what should be done, versus mentally dealing with the adversary of thought. And so when I think about the ego, and I think about all the great things that I could be achieving or I am trying to achieve as I move forward, and I realize that oftentimes the only thing that I'm really dealing with, the only challenger that I have in my life, the only devil that I've ever really seen has been the devil of my own thoughts. The ego, again, as I tell people all the time, the ego can talk you into something, and the ego can talk you out of something, more so than anybody else. Your very own thinking might talk you into some very bad situations. But your very own thinking can also talk you out of situations that you should be taking, or situations that you should be partaking in. And so when I think about, again, just moving forward in my life, I don't see a lot of opponents around me to stop me, to slow me down. When I think about moving forward in my own life, what I tend to come up against is the mechanics of my very own thinking. All the things that I've learned from the past, the recordings of my failures, the recordings of my hurts and pains, and oftentimes those recordings, they run. As we learn to meditate more and more, to get silent within ourselves, the silence, believe it or not, over time, the silence of meditation over time, actually kills out the ego, a lot of the thinking. No, it's not going to totally kill it out completely, but it does slow down the thoughts. It does give you more control over being conscious and what you want to think. Today, this is just really going to be part one of the video on the ego, because to me, just so much can be said about the ego. But I just want to take this time out this morning just to share a few things about the ego and how, when we can get control of that, we really can have gotten control of ourselves. Again, the only opponent you're going to find on this journey, true opponent, will be your very own thinking against what truth and God has taught you. And so I hope this video just helped to expose the ego and what it is that we actually are dealing with day to day, and how we can even get over self, and just remembering that that's all it is. It's just thinking. And if we can just be conscious sometime when the ego is running that dialogue, we'll realize that what it's saying has nothing to do with right now. It's either talking about the hurts of the past or the fears of the future. And if it's not speaking on that, the ego is talking about the thirst that it has, wanting this or wanting that. But to be at peace, the ego wants no part of it. So I hope this video blessed you today, and I'll be back with part 2 soon. And until then, God bless you. Namaste. God loves you, and so do I. Because if I didn't, I wouldn't be doing these videos, as I always said. Peace, everybody.